The Texas sun was a relentless, punishing thing, beating down on my backyard as if trying to bleach the very green from the grass. I stood guard at the grill, the heat from the charcoal, a familiar echo of the oppressive afternoon air. The sizzle of burgers turning on the grate was a rhythmic counterpoint to the high-pitched symphony of children's laughter. My boys, Liam and Owen, were a blur of motion, their small bodies darting across the lawn in a chaotic game of tag with their cousins. It was, by all appearances, a perfect Sunday afternoon. My brother Sean was wrestling with the volleyball net, his good-natured curses lost in the breeze. Under the cool shade of the patio awning, my parents were chatting with Alara's folks, the comfortable murmur of their conversation, a steady hum beneath the joyful shrieks of the kids. It was the picture of domestic bliss, a carefully curated snapshot of the life we had built. "Dad, when's the food going to be ready?" Liam called out, his 10-year-old face glistening with a sheen of sweat and happiness. 20 minutes, champ," I said, giving him a theatrical wink. "Go wash up." My eyes drifted over to my wife, Alara. She was sitting alone at the edge of the patio, isolated from the familial warmth. Her head was bowed, her focus entirely consumed by the small, glowing screen in her hand. Again, for the past 3 months, that phone had become a permanent extension of her arm, a digital appendage I couldn't seem to compete with. She'd changed the password, too, a small, silent act of fortification that felt like a wall being erected in the middle of our 11-year marriage. The night before, a chasm had opened between us in the dark. I'd reached for her, a simple, reflexive gesture of comfort and connection, but she'd flinched away. Her body had stiffened, and she'd muttered something about being tired, turning her back to me. It was the 3rd time that week. The casual intimacy that had once been the bedrock of our relationship had been replaced by a cold, unbreachable distance. A familiar knot tightened in my stomach as I watched her now. Her fingers flew across the screen, a small, private smile playing on her lips. It was a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Whoever she was texting, whatever world existed inside that little rectangle of glass and light, it was making her happier than I could. "Honey, can you bring out the potato salad?" I called, my voice a little louder than intended, deliberately piercing her bubble. She looked up, startled, her eyes wide as if I'd woken her from a deep and pleasant dream. "What?" "The salad," I repeated, gesturing toward the house with my tongs. "Oh, yeah, sure." She slipped the phone into her pocket and disappeared into the house without another word, leaving a void where her presence should have been. My mother approached the grill, her brow furrowed with a concern she tried to keep out of her voice. "Everything okay with you two?" she asked quietly, her gaze following the path Alara had taken. "Just busy with work," I lied, forcing a smile that felt brittle on my lips. "You know how it island?" But things weren't okay, not by a long shot. The distance between us hadn't appeared overnight. It had been a slow, insidious creep. It began with occasional late nights at the office, which then evolved into weekend team-building events and emergency client meetings. I wasn't a fool. The signs were all there, blinking like neon warnings in the periphery of my life. But I'd been pushing them away, choosing willful ignorance over painful truth. I focused on the kids, on my demanding job as a marketing director at Skybrand Solutions, on anything but the gaping hole that was tearing through the fabric of my marriage. Last week, the evidence had become tangible. A receipt had fallen from her purse as I was grabbing her car keys for her. Moretti's, a high-end Italian place downtown. The bill was for $230, which included an $80 bottle of wine. It was a dinner for 2. When I'd casually mentioned it, asking if she'd taken a client out, she'd snatched the receipt from my hand with a defensive fury that had stunned me. "It was a work thing," she'd snapped, her eyes flashing. "Why are you checking up on me?" I hadn't been. It was an accident. But her reaction, so swift and so venomous, told me everything I needed to know. The sharp ring of the doorbell cut through my troubled thoughts. I frowned. Everyone we'd invited was already here. "I'll get it." Alara called out from inside the house, her voice suddenly energized, almost giddy. She practically sprinted to the front door. I heard the murmur of voices, and then laughter. Her laugh. It was bright and musical, a sound I realized with a pang that I hadn't heard in what felt like an eternity. And then she appeared on the patio, stepping out into the sunlight. Beside her stood a man I'd never seen before in my life. He was tall, at least 3 inches taller than my 6 feet, with the kind of sculpted, muscular build that spoke of dedicated hours at the gym. Designer sunglasses rested on his perfectly styled hair, an expensive watch gleamed on his wrist, and when he smiled, his teeth were unnervingly perfect. Everything about him screamed money and a level of confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Everyone," Ilara announced, her voice oddly high-pitched, a nervous tremor beneath the cheerfulness. "This is Julian. Julian Henderson. He's a friend from work." The way she said the word friend, with a slight, almost imperceptible hesitation, made the knot in my stomach twist into a cold, hard stone. Julian nodded at the assembled family members with a casual ease before his eyes, hidden behind the dark lenses, landed on me. There was something in his posture, in the set of his jaw, that felt like a challenge. Or maybe it was just simple disdain. "So you're Caleb," he said, his voice smooth as he walked over to the grill, invading my space. "Ilara's told me so much about you." "Funny," I replied, gripping the handle of the grill tongs until my knuckles were white, fighting to keep my voice steady. "She's never mentioned you." An uncomfortable silence descended upon the backyard, thick and suffocating. It swallowed the children's laughter, smothered the background music, and turned the warm afternoon air chilly. My father, sensing the sudden shift, cleared his throat and began talking loudly about the Cowboys' chances this season, a desperate attempt to stitch the torn atmosphere back together. My mother-in-law pulled Ilara aside, whispering furiously into her ear while casting worried glances in my direction. The children, with their innate sensitivity to adult tension, stopped their game and gravitated toward the perceived safety of their grandparents. Julian seemed utterly unfazed by the social wreckage he had created. He helped himself to a beer from the cooler, popping the cap off with a practiced flourish. "Nice place you've got here," he said, looking around with the dismissive air of someone evaluating a property for purchase. "Quaint. Quaint. Our 4-bedroom house in North Austin, the one we'd worked so damn hard for, was many things, but it was not quaint. We had saved for years while living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, a constant game of financial Tetris. I'd pulled double shifts at my first marketing job, my eyes gritty with exhaustion, and Ilara had taken on freelance design work on weekends, her fingers flying across her keyboard late into the night. Every brick in this house, every blade of grass in this yard, represented our shared sweat and sacrifice. And this man, this stranger, had dismissed it with a single condescending word. "Julian works in venture capital," Ilara explained, returning to his side as if drawn by an invisible string. She placed a hand lightly on his arm. "He's helping our company secure its next round of funding." "Is that what they're calling it these days?" The words slipped out before I could stop them, laced with a bitterness I hadn't intended to reveal. Ilara's eyes flashed with anger. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, turning my attention back to the grill, where the burgers were threatening to burn. The simple task felt like an anchor in a raging sea. "Food's almost ready. Everyone can start taking seats." My hands were trembling slightly as I transferred the burgers to a platter. This felt like some surreal nightmare. My wife had brought her lover to our family barbecue. She had introduced him to our children, to our parents. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it made my head spin. The next hour was excruciating. Julian dominated the conversation, holding court at our patio table. He regaled the captive audience with tales of his business trips to Tokyo and Paris, his vacation home in Aspen, the tech startup he'd sold for a staggering sum before he'd even turned 30. And through it all, Ilara gazed at him with an undisguised admiration that felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "The condo in Aspen is right on the slopes," Julian was saying, gesturing with his beer bottle. "Floor-to-ceiling windows, private hot tub on the deck. Ilara, you should have seen the sunset the last time I was there. Reminded me of that view from our hotel in Santorini." I froze, a forkful of potato salad halfway to my mouth. Santorini? Ilara had never been to Santorini. She had a whole Pinterest board dedicated to a future trip to Greece, a dream we'd talked about for years but had never managed to make happen. The timing was never right, the money always needed for something more practical. A deep, blotchy red flush crept up Ilara's neck and spread across her face. "Julian?" she murmured, a clear warning in her low voice. He caught himself, his eyes flicking my way for a fraction of a second. "I mean, the photos I showed you from my trip last year," he corrected, a little too quickly. But the damage was done. The lie was as clumsy and transparent as glass. Across the table, my brother Sean kept shooting me concerned glances. My father had grown increasingly quiet, his jaw set in a hard line, a sure sign he was furious. The only ones who seemed oblivious to the emotional minefield were the kids, thankfully engrossed in their own world of games and sugar-fed energy. "More ribs, Julian," I offered, holding out the platter, my voice a mask of civility. "I'm good," he said dismissively, waving a hand, trying to watch the carbs. "Though," he added, his eyes flicking to Alara, who immediately blushed, "I make exceptions for certain pleasures." That was it. That was the moment I knew, with a certainty that was as cold and hard as a block of ice in my chest. The look they exchanged wasn't subtle or ambiguous. It was the look of two people who had seen each other naked, who had shared secrets in the dark. It was intimate and exclusive, and it branded me as an outsider in my own home. I set the platter down carefully on the table, a strange, chilling calm settling over me. The chaos in my mind suddenly quieted, replaced by a single, focused thought. "Ilara," I said, my voice even, "can I see you inside for a minute?" "We're in the middle of lunch, Caleb," she said, refusing to meet my eyes, her attention suddenly fixed on her half-eaten burger. "It won't take long." With visible reluctance, she pushed her chair back and followed me into the kitchen, the screen door swinging shut behind us with a soft click that sounded as final as a closing cell door. As soon as the kitchen door swung shut, sealing us in a pocket of strained silence, I turned to face her. The familiar scent of our home, a mix of cinnamon from the morning's French toast and the smoky aroma from the grill, felt alien, tainted. "What the hell is going on?" I asked, keeping my voice low, a tight leash on the fury coiling in my gut. "Why is your friend here, at our family barbecue?" She crossed her arms, a defensive posture I knew all too well. "He was in the neighborhood and wanted to stop by. What's the big deal?" "The big deal, Ilara?" My voice was incredulous. "The man is practically marking his territory out there. Our kids are here. Our parents are here. Have you completely lost your mind?" "You're overreacting," she said, her gaze darting toward the door, as if planning an escape. "He's just being friendly." I moved, blocking her path, and caught her arm. The contact felt electric, charged with months of unspoken tension. "Is he the reason you've been coming home late? Is he why you changed your phone password?" She yanked her arm away, her eyes blazing. "Don't do this, Caleb. Not now." "When then?" I shot back, the dam of my composure beginning to crack. "When would be a convenient time for you to discuss why you've invited your lover to our family gathering?" Her face hardened, her defensiveness morphing into cold defiance. "You're being paranoid and ridiculous. I'm going back outside." She reached for the doorknob, but I had one last card to play. "Santorini, Alara? When exactly did you go to Santorini with him?" She froze, her hand hovering over the knob. The color drained from her face. For a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I married vulnerable, caught, perhaps even regretful. I held my breath, hoping, praying for a confession, for the truth no matter how painful. Instead, she squared her shoulders. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by an icy armor. She turned to face me, her expression flat, devoid of emotion. "Last month, the marketing conference in Chicago, I was with Julian in Greece." Her voice was a monotone, as if she were reciting a weather report. "Happy now?" The confirmation didn't bring relief. It struck me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I had suspected, of course, but hearing her say it aloud, so bluntly, made it real in a way that twisted my insides into a painful knot. "How long?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She sighed, a sound of pure exasperation, not remorse. 7 months, maybe 8. 7 months. A lifetime. While I had been coaching Liam's Little League team, helping Owen with his science fair project, planning our summer vacation to the lake, my wife, my partner, had been sleeping with another man. The timeline of her lies unspooled in my mind, a sickening montage of betrayal. "Why bring him here?" I asked, genuinely bewildered. "Why today, with everyone we love watching?" Something flickered in her eyes, then uncertainty, perhaps a sliver of shame, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "It wasn't my idea," she admitted, her voice low. "Julian wanted to meet the boys." "Meet the—" I stopped, the horrifying implications hitting me with the force of a speeding train. "You're planning to leave me. That's what this is about." She didn't deny it. Her silence was a confession. "I was going to tell you next week, after I had secured my own place." I was left standing alone in the kitchen, the heart of our home, my hands shaking with a cocktail of suppressed rage and profound humiliation. Through the window, I could see the scene on the patio. Julian had his arm draped casually over the back of Alara's chair as she sat back down. My brother Sean was on his feet now, clearly agitated. My father had moved to sit with the children, a protective barrier against the poison seeping into our day. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I returned to the backyard. I had one goal: get through the afternoon without causing a scene for the kids. Just for the kids. But Julian had other plans. As I approached the table, he stood up, deliberately blocking my path. "Look, Caleb," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I think we should clear the air. You seem upset about something." "This isn't the time or the place," I said quietly, my eyes pleading with him to stop. "No, I think it is," he insisted, stepping closer, invading my personal space. "See, Alara's been unhappy for a long time. She deserves better than this." He gestured vaguely at me, at our home, at the life I thought we'd built together. A deadly silence fell over the yard. "Julian, stop," Alara said, but there was no real conviction in her voice. "No, he needs to hear this," Julian continued, his tone dripping with condescension. "You've been holding her back, man. She's brilliant. She could be running that company if she wasn't always rushing home to play house." He looked directly at me, a cruel smirk on his face. "Do you know what she told me? She said being with you is like being slowly suffocated, like watching paint dry." Each word was a physical blow. I looked at Alara, desperately hoping for a denial, for her to leap to my defense. But she was staring at the ground, her face flushed with shame. My father stood up. "I think it's time for you to leave, son." Julian ignored him, his eyes locked on me. "I'm not going to do this in front of my children," I said, my voice shaking with the effort of control. "Please leave my home." "Your home," Julian smirked. "That's cute. Tell him, Lara." And my wife finally looked up, her eyes meeting mine, cold and distant. "The house is in my name too, Caleb, and Julian isn't going anywhere." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper only I could hear. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack a bag and leave. Alara will call you tomorrow about divorce arrangements. And don't worry about the kids. I've always wanted sons." Something inside me snapped. The carefully constructed dam of my control shattered into a million pieces. "My sons? You're talking about my sons? Dad?" Liam's uncertain voice cut through the tension. He and Owen were watching, wide-eyed, their faces a canvas of confusion and fear. I turned to my brother. "Sean, take the kids inside. Please." "No way," Julian interjected. "They should see this. They should see what happens when a real man takes charge." He took another step toward me. "Time for you to go, Caleb. I'm running things now." And then he shoved me, hard. I stumbled backward, caught off balance. Gasps erupted around the table. The children froze. He shoved me again. "What are you going to do about it, big man?" I held my ground this time. "Last chance. Leave." He laughed in my face. "Make me." Then he swung. His fist connected with my jaw, sending a blinding explosion of pain across my face. I tasted blood. Time slowed. I saw my son's terrified faces. I saw Alara, her hand over her mouth, making no move to intervene. I saw Julian advancing, confident in his victory. "See, Alara, this is who you married. A pathetic." He didn't finish the sentence. Years of boxing in college, a discipline I hadn't used in over a decade, came rushing back in a primal surge. I ducked under his next wild swing and countered with a right hook that connected squarely with his jaw. The impact sent a shockwave up my arm, but Julian was the one who went down, crashing into the patio table, sending plates and glasses flying. He sprawled on the ground, blood streaming from his split lip, looking up at me in stunned disbelief. "Dad!" Owen cried out, and the sound of my 7-year-old's voice brought me back to reality. The fight was far from over. "Sean, get the kids inside now," I ordered, my voice raw. This time, my brother moved without hesitation, quickly ushering the wide-eyed children and my shell-shocked parents into the house. Julian struggled to his feet, his handsome features distorted by a mask of pure fury. His perfect facade was shattered. "You're dead," he snarled, charging at me like a wounded bull. I sidestepped, using his own momentum against him, and sent him sprawling into the heavy grill. It toppled over with a deafening crash, scattering glowing hot coals across the stone patio. Julian howled in pain as one burned through his designer shirt, searing the skin on his chest. "Stop it, both of you, stop it!" Ilara was screaming now, finally jolted into action, but Julian was beyond reason. He grabbed an empty beer bottle from the ground and smashed it against the edge of the fallen table, brandishing the jagged, broken remains like a weapon. "Julian, no." Ilara lurched forward, grabbing his arm. He shook her off violently, sending her stumbling to the ground. That was his fatal mistake. Seeing him lay his hands on her, even in his rage, triggered something primal in me. I tackled him with everything I had, driving him backward until we both crashed through the flimsy garden table. We hit the ground hard, with Julian underneath me. The broken bottle flew from his hand. Before he could recover, I pinned him, my forearm pressed firmly across his throat. "If you ever come near my family again," I growled, my face inches from his, the metallic scent of blood and fear filling the air. "If you ever so much as look at my children, they won't find enough of you to identify." The arrogance in his eyes was gone, replaced by pure, animal fear. He had expected an easy victory over a suburban dad. He had been disastrously wrong. I released him and stood up, my body humming with adrenaline. Blood dripped from a cut on my forehead, and my knuckles were raw and scraped. Julian scrambled to his feet, backing away. His perfect appearance was in shambles. His expensive clothes were torn and dirty, blood streamed from his nose and lip, and a burn mark marred his chest. "Ilara," he gasped, his voice choked. "Let's go." And to my utter disbelief, my wife, the mother of my children, my partner of 15 years, moved to his side without a moment's hesitation. "You're choosing him?" I asked, my voice hollow with shock. "After this?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "I can't do this anymore, Caleb. I'm sorry." "The kids?" "I'll call you tomorrow about arrangements," she said, echoing Julian's earlier, chilling words. And then they were gone, disappearing into his sleek silver Porsche, leaving behind the wreckage of our party, the wreckage of our life. The next few hours passed in a surreal blur. My family helped clean up the yard while I sat at the kitchen table, holding an ice pack to my swollen jaw, trying to process the cataclysm that had just torn through my world. When Sean returned with Liam and Owen, their eyes were red-rimmed, but they ran to me immediately. "Dad, are you okay?" Liam asked, his young face etched with a seriousness far beyond his years. I hugged them both tightly, burying my face in their hair, their familiar scent a small comfort in the chaos. That night, after we'd built a makeshift fort in the living room, and the boys had finally fallen asleep curled against me, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ilara walking away with Julian. Around 3 a.m., I carefully extracted myself from the tangle of blankets and sleeping children and went to our bedroom. My bedroom now, I supposed. Her presence was everywhere. Her clothes still filled the closet, her jewelry box sat on the dresser. I opened her nightstand drawer, looking for her passport, needing some irrational, tangible proof of her trip to Greece. But what I found instead made my blood run cold. Tucked beneath a stack of old paperbacks were 2 plane tickets. One way to Seattle, dated for next Thursday. The names on the tickets were Ilara Reed and Julian Henderson. And beside them, a brochure for a prestigious private school in Seattle, with notes scribbled in Ilara's familiar handwriting about enrollment deadlines and tuition fees. She was planning to take my sons. She was going to rip them away from their home, their school, their family, and move them 3,000 miles across the country to start a new life with him. Acting on a desperate instinct, I began searching more thoroughly. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it in the back of her closet, tucked away in an old shoebox, her old phone. She'd upgraded a few months ago, but had kept the old one as a backup. It powered on without a password. What I found made me physically ill. Hundreds of texts between her and Julian, dating back 8 months. Pictures she'd sent him intimate, smiling pictures taken in our bathroom, in our bed. They had planned their trysts, complained about me, about our life together. "Caleb is a good father, but so boring in bed," one of her texts read. "He has no ambition, no drive, not like you." "Leave him," Julian had replied. "You deserve better. I can give you everything he can't." There were videos, too. I forced myself to watch one, just for a few seconds. It was them together in a hotel room, laughing. Alara, my wife, with another man. I shut off the phone, a profound cold seeping into my bones. And then, with a sudden, horrifying clarity, I realized something even worse. The dates of their rendezvous, the timing of certain messages they lined up perfectly with business trips Ilara had taken. Trips I had supported, rearranging my own work schedule, taking days off to be with the boys, encouraging her career advancement. I hadn't just been a cuckolded husband. I had been her unwitting accomplice. I had been enabling her affair. The realization hit me with the force of another physical blow. I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up, my body violently rejecting the painful truth. When I emerged, shaky and spent, my father was standing in the hallway, his face lined with concern. "Come on," he said, his voice gruff but gentle. "Let's have a drink." We sat at the kitchen table with 2 glasses of whiskey. "I should have seen it coming," I said, staring into the amber liquid. "Don't do that to yourself," my father replied firmly. "She made her choices, Caleb. This is on her, not you." My voice was tight with a new, colder fear. "I found plane tickets, Seattle, one way, in school brochures." My father's expression darkened. "She was planning to take the boys." I nodded, feeling sick again. "Next Thursday." "Not going to happen," he said, his voice hard as steel. "First thing tomorrow, we call a lawyer. Get some sleep, son. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." He was right. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. The fight wasn't over. It had just moved to a new battlefield. The morning brought a fresh kind of hell. Alara didn't call. Instead, a text message appeared on my phone, cold and clinical. "We'll pick up the boys at 2. Julian and I are getting a place together. We can discuss divorce arrangements then." No apology, no explanation. Just the practical logistics of dismantling our family as if it were a piece of flat-pack furniture. "She can't just take them," my mother said, her voice trembling with indignation when I showed her the message. "Not after what happened yesterday." "She's their mother," I replied, the words tasting like ash. "Technically, she didn't do anything wrong in the eyes of the law. She didn't hit anyone." "She brought that man into your home," my father argued, his face grim. "She allowed him to assault you in front of your children. That's endangerment." "Dad's right," Sean added, his hand on my shoulder. "You need to talk to a lawyer before she gets here." And so, while my parents took the boys to the park to shield them from the escalating drama, I found myself in the sterile, wood-paneled office of Diana Patel. A sharp, no-nonsense, family law attorney Sean had somehow managed to contact on a Sunday morning. After listening patiently to my account of the previous day's events, her expression grew more serious. "Based on what you've told me," she said, her voice calm and measured, "you have a strong case for temporary full custody, especially with your family members as witnesses to the assault." "I don't want to keep my sons from their mother," I said, the words painful to speak aloud. I don't want them around that man." Diana nodded, a flicker of understanding in her professional gaze. "We can request a temporary restraining order against Mr. Henderson that would legally prevent him from being present during Ilara's parenting time. Given the physical assault, that shouldn't be difficult to obtain." She leaned forward. "First, I recommend you document everything. Take photos of your injuries. Write down a detailed account of what happened while it's fresh in your memory, and ask your family members to do the same." I touched my jaw, which had blossomed into an impressive purple and blue bruise overnight. "Already done." "Good. Now, about the house." I hesitated, then took the plunge. "There is something else. I found evidence that Ilara was planning to take the boys to Seattle. One-way tickets for next Thursday." Diana's expression grew grave. "That changes things significantly. If she's planning to remove the children from the state without your knowledge or consent, we need to act immediately. I'll file for an emergency hearing first thing tomorrow morning." "What do I do when she comes at 2 o'clock?" I asked, my stomach churning. "Do not let the children leave with her," she stated firmly. "If she insists, call the police. Tell them you have reason to believe she is a flight risk and intends to commit parental abduction. Show them the tickets if necessary. This is going to be incredibly difficult, Mr. Reed, but the alternative, allowing your children to be taken across the country, away from you, would be far more traumatic in the long run." At 2 p.m., exactly, the doorbell rang. My parents took the boys upstairs while Sean positioned himself casually in the living room, within earshot but not directly involved. I opened the door to find Alara standing on the doorstep alone, her eyes hidden behind a large pair of sunglasses, despite the cloudy day. She was wearing expensive clothes I'd never seen before. "Where are the boys?" she asked without preamble. "Inside. Where's Julian?" She shifted uncomfortably. "In the car. I thought it would be better if he waited." "At least you got that much right," I said, making no move to let her in. "I spoke with a lawyer this morning." That got her attention. She pushed the sunglasses up, revealing red-rimmed, swollen eyes. "A lawyer? Already? Caleb, don't you think you're overreacting?" The audacity of her question left me momentarily speechless. "Overreacting? Your boyfriend assaulted me in our backyard in front of our children, and you left with him. How exactly am I supposed to react, Alara?" "Things got out of hand," she mumbled, looking ashamed. "Julian feels terrible about it." "I don't give a damn how Julian feels. What I care about is what you're putting our sons through." "Enter." "That's why I'm here," she said, her voice taking on an edge of desperation. "To take them somewhere calm, away from all this tension." "Seattle?" I asked pointedly. Her face went pale. "What?" "I found the tickets, Alara. One way to Seattle. Were you even going to tell me, or just disappear?" "It wasn't definite yet," she stammered. "We were just exploring options. Options that involve kidnapping my children." "It's not kidnapping when it's their mother," she shot back. "Actually, Island. It's called parental abduction, and it's a federal offense." She seemed to deflate, her defensive posture crumbling. "The boys aren't going anywhere with you," I stated firmly. "Not today, not tomorrow, not to Seattle. Not while you're with him." "You can't keep my children from me," she hissed. "I'll call the police." "Go ahead," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I'm sure they'd be very interested in the assault that took place here yesterday and your plans to flee the state. My lawyer has already filed for an emergency custody order and a restraining order against Julian." "Mom?" We both turned. Liam was standing in the hallway, watching us with solemn, troubled eyes. Alara's demeanor changed instantly. "Liam, baby!" She pushed past me to reach him, kneeling down. "Are you ready to come with Mommy for a few days?" Liam looked at her, then at me. "Is that man coming too?" Alara faltered. "Well, yes, but—" "I don't want to go," Liam said firmly, his small voice unwavering. "He hurt Dad. I saw him." He backed away from her, toward me. "You're turning them against me," she accused, tears streaming freely now. "No, Alara," I said quietly. "You did that all by yourself." She stared at me, her face a mixture of fury and despair. "This isn't over," she repeated, her voice a venomous whisper, before turning and storming back to Julian's waiting car. The next day, as predicted, Alara filed for divorce, requesting full and sole custody. Her petition was a work of fiction, claiming I had anger management issues and had attacked Julian unprovoked, making her fear for the children's safety. The rage I felt was cold and absolute. If she wanted a war, she would get one, but I would fight with the truth. I spent the afternoon visiting neighbors and secured security camera footage from 2 houses that clearly showed Julian assaulting me first. That evening, I called her father. "I don't want to put you in the middle," I told him, "but will you tell the truth about what you saw if it comes to that?" There was a long pause. "We love our daughter, Caleb," he said, his voice heavy. "But what happened on Sunday? That wasn't right. We'll testify if we have to." End of say. Later that night, my phone began to blow up. 113 missed calls, dozens of texts from Alara, a chaotic stream of pleading, threats, and desperation. "Please call me. Julian and I broke up. Let me come home. I'm outside." I looked out the window. Her car was at the curb. I opened the front door to find her looking haggard and broken. "Please, Caleb," she whispered. "I made a terrible mistake." "Which one?" I asked, my voice devoid of warmth. "The 7-month affair, or bringing your lover to our home, or leaving with him after he assaulted me, or lying about it in a court document? How did you—" "I found your old phone, Alara. I saw everything." She sagged against the doorframe. "He's gone," she admitted, tears welling. "When the reality of having me and the kids set in, he bolted, said he wasn't ready for an instant family." "So now you want to come home," I stated flatly. "Now that your fantasy has collapsed?" I want my family back. That's not an option anymore." I crossed my arms. And you should know, I have security footage of Sunday, and your parents are willing to testify. So if you plan to continue with your story that I was the aggressor, you might want to reconsider. The color drained from her face. The fight was gone. Defeated, she finally asked, "Can I see them tomorrow? Without Julian?" "He's gone, Caleb. Really gone." "Oh?" "Then yes," I said. The battle won, but the victory feeling hollow. Supervised visits, until the court decides otherwise. The divorce proceedings were every bit as messy as Diana had predicted. Alara, stripped of her lies and abandoned by her lover, fought desperately, clawing for any advantage. She fought for full custody, then for joint custody, and finally, when the mountain of evidence against her became insurmountable, she accepted the court's decision. The judge, after reviewing the security footage and hearing the testimonies, including a reluctant but honest account from her own father, awarded me primary physical custody of Liam and Owen. Ilara received generous visitation rights, but with one unshakable condition: a permanent restraining order that explicitly barred Julian Henderson from being present. The house remained mine. Ilara, wanting a fresh start away from the scene of her humiliation, moved into a small apartment closer to her office. Julian himself vanished like a ghost. According to a mutual acquaintance from Ilara's company, he had accepted a transfer to his firm's Seattle office, eager to put as much distance as possible between himself and the mess he had helped create. 6 months after that fateful Sunday, life had found a new, quieter rhythm. The boys spent weekdays with me and alternate weekends, and one weeknight with Ilara. They were healing. The raw wounds of confusion and anger were slowly scarring over, replaced by the incredible resilience of youth. They were still prone to occasional nightmares that brought them crawling into my bed in the middle of the night, but their laughter once again filled the rooms of our house. Ilara and I maintained a civil, if distant, relationship for their sake. Our conversations were brief, logistical, and centered entirely on the children. The betrayal still stung, a dull ache in my chest that flared up at unexpected moments, but time was slowly sanding down its sharpest edges. I had even started dating again, cautiously. Nothing serious. Occasional dinners with Amy, a kind kindergarten teacher a friend had introduced me to. It was nice. It was a start. One crisp autumn evening, I was sitting on the back patio, the furniture repaired, and the space reclaimed from the memory of the fight. I watched Liam and Owen playing basketball on the small court I'd installed over the summer, their shouts and laughter echoing in the twilight. The doorbell rang. Expecting the pizza delivery we'd ordered, I went to answer it. Instead, Ilara stood on the porch, looking nervous and uncertain. "I know it's not my weekend," she said quickly, twisting the strap of her purse, "but I was in the neighborhood and I thought I might say goodnight to the boys." "Sure," I said, surprised by my own lack of animosity. I stepped back to let her in. "They're out back." She hesitated in the entryway, her eyes scanning the living room. I'd redecorated, repainting the walls and replacing the old couch. I had needed to erase the painful reminders, to create a space that felt like a new beginning. "You've changed things," she observed, her voice soft. "Had to." She nodded, a sad understanding in her eyes. "It looks good. Masculine, but not too. Bachelor pad." "Thanks, I think." An awkward silence fell between us, filled only by the rhythmic thump of the basketball outside. "Caleb," she began, then stopped, struggling with the words. "I never properly apologized. For everything." "No," I said simply, not unkindly. "You didn't." "You." She took a deep breath and looked me straight in the eye. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice clear and steady. "What I did was unforgivable. I destroyed our family because I was selfish and stupid, and I thought I wanted something else. I was wrong." I studied her face, searching for the familiar tells of manipulation or insincerity, but found only what appeared to be genuine, profound regret. "Why are you telling me this now?" She shrugged slightly. "I'm in therapy, working on accountability, taking responsibility for my actions instead of blaming everyone else." "That's good," I said, and I meant it. "I'm glad." "I don't expect forgiveness," she continued. I wanted you to know that I understand what I did, and I live with that regret every single day." From the backyard came a loud whoop as Liam scored a basket. The sound was a welcome interruption. "Come on," I said, gesturing toward the back door. They'll be happy to see you. As we walked through the house, she paused, touching my arm lightly. The brief contact was strange, a ghost of a life that no longer existed. You're a good father, Caleb. The best. I never should have tried to take them from you. No, I agreed, my voice flat. You shouldn't have. She dropped her hand, accepting the boundary. Do you think they'll ever fully trust me again? I considered the question seriously. Kids are more forgiving than adults, I said. Give them time, be consistent, keep showing up. That's all any of us can do. She nodded, blinking back tears. And you? Will you ever forgive me? I looked at her, this woman, who I'd once planned to grow old with, the mother of my children, now essentially a co-parent and nothing more. I'm working on it, I said honestly. Not for your sake, but for mine, and for them. She accepted this with a sad smile. That's fair. We stepped out onto the patio. The boys spotted her immediately. Mom! Owen shouted, dropping the ball and running toward her with the unrestrained joy only a 7-year-old can possess. Liam followed more slowly, his welcome warm but more reserved. As I watched Ilara hug our sons, I felt a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying lift slightly from my shoulders. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but for the first time, it felt like we were all moving forward, albeit on different paths. Later that night, long after Ilara had left and the boys were tucked into bed, I sat alone on the patio with a beer, looking up at the vast canopy of stars. My phone buzzed, a text from Amy. Still on for dinner tomorrow? I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile, and typed back, absolutely. The future stretched before me, uncertain but not empty. It wasn't the future I'd planned, but perhaps it was the one I needed. The soft sound of small feet on the patio made me turn. Liam stood in the doorway, silhouetted in his pajamas. Can't sleep, buddy? I asked. He shook his head and came to sit beside me on the chaise lounge. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the chirping of the crickets. Dad, he said finally, are you and Mom ever getting back together? I put my arm around his thin shoulders, pulling him close. No, champ, that's not going to happen. He nodded, seeming unsurprised. That's okay, he said quietly. I like how things are now. You do? Yeah, he said, leaning his head against my shoulder. You're happier, you smile more. He paused. And Mom is nicer too. She doesn't look at her phone all the time when I'm with her. Out of the mouths of babes. A lump formed in my throat. I'm glad to hear that, buddy. Dad? Yeah? Thanks, he said, his voice small but clear. For not leaving, for fighting for us. I swallowed hard against the sudden surge of emotion. Always, Liam, I whispered, my voice thick. Always. That's what fathers do. We sat together in the comfortable silence, looking up at the vast Texas sky until he fell asleep against my side. As I carefully lifted him into my arms to carry him back to bed, his words echoed in my mind. Thanks for not leaving, for fighting for us. Some battles are worth every scar they leave behind. Some victories aren't about winning, but about protecting what matters most. In the end, that's what love really island. Not the fairy tale, but the choice to stay, to fight, to rebuild. And as I tucked the blanket around my sleeping son, I knew with absolute certainty that it was a choice I would make again every single day for the rest of my life.